Welcome to Masonic Memories, where we chat with senior members of our lodge and reminisce about events, people, and their contributions to our fraternity. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and listen to the way things were back in the day as we meet on the plum, act on the level, and part on the square. Richard Earl Johnson has had a very successful personal career and Masonic career. We will talk a little bit about both, but today we will focus on his Blue Lodge activities. In later sessions, we will discuss his Grand Lodge success and his shrine activities. Your beautiful home overlooking Buttermilk Bay.
Sure.
And why don't we talk about what enticed you to become a Mason?
Well, several things. As a kid, I used to look through the Sears and Roebuck catalog every time it came out, generally in July or August of every year. And I would look through it, and I always come upon the ring section, and I asked my mother, what are these significant rings that they have in the Sears catalog? And she said, oh, that's the Masons. I said, well, what are the Masons? She says, I don't know. She said, but you got to be a rich man to be a member of that organization. So I said, oh. And as years went on, I never heard any more about the Masons until we bought our first house in Northborough. And lived next door to Bob Bailey, who was a past master at UB. And one day Joan is in the backyard and she's doing some yard work, and Bob Bailey come over to talk to her, and she said, oh, I see you have a Masonic ring. And he said, well, what do you know about the Mason? She said, well, my whole family has been involved in Masonry all the years. She was a rainbow girl and kind of understood what the Masons were all about. So she said, well, you know, Dick is interested in joining the Masons. And he was supposed to be contacted by people from St. Bernard's in Southborough about joining there. She said, he's waited 2 years and nothing has happened. And Bailey said, well, we'll take care of that right now. So this was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So at 6:30, I'm in the car with Bailey, and we're on our way down to United Brethren for a pre-app meeting, and the rest is history. So, you know, I petitioned, and on my investigating committee was Lee Whittemore and Alden. I can't remember.
Pomeroy.
Alden Pomeroy. And there was a third guy, which to this day I could never remember who he was, but he was a nice guy. And next thing you know, I'm getting ready to take my degrees. And during the process of my third degree, the district deputy was in attendance, and that was Right Worshipful John Gong Moy. He was a Chinese fellow, and he was close to 6 foot tall, which was very tall for a Chinaman. But John was employed at Raytheon, and he was very active in Scottish Rite Valley of Boston. And John had a presence about him that was very, very, very impressive. He was a gentleman of the First Order, and when he spoke, everybody listened. And he was such an imposing figure that as I was kneeling at the altar, taking my obligation, I'm looking at him and I said, you know, that's a class act. And that's something that I espouse to emulate. I thought he was just a cut above everybody else. And I had a thought in my mind that I was going to follow in his footsteps, whatever way I had to do it. And ultimately I did, but that's a story for a later time.
Okay. How did you get into line?
Well, at that time, United Brethren had a 5-year wait to get into line. So, out of the clear blue sky, when Murad Muradian was going in as master, somebody was dropping out, and I can picture the guy, but I can't remember his name. But he was dropping out, and Murad came to me and said, would you like to step in? And I said, does that mean that I would be part of the process? He said, yes. I said, okay. So everybody moved up to the position that was being vacated, and I became the inside sentinel. So I came home and I said to Joan, I have an opportunity to be appointed in the line of the lodge. And she's going, no, you don't have the time for it. I said, I can make the time. She's going, no, I'm not in favor of it. And I said, well, that's what I want to do. So she said, all right, I'll make a deal. I said, all right, what's that? She said, you go into line, but you never, ever skip a chair. And I said, well, why is that? She said, your children are so young at the present time, they have no clue what you're doing in lodge. But by the time you become master, the children will be old enough to understand a little bit about it, and they might appreciate your efforts a little more. And I said, deal. So, during the 7 years, there were a couple of opportunities that came along that I could advance. And I went to Joan, and she said, nope, you remember our deal. A deal is a deal, and that's it. So I said, okay. So I did. I served in every year, or in every chair, to become master. And it was a significant point in my life that I've never regretted.
And this was in the old building.
It started in the old building. Yeah. I was in one of the last classes in the old building before it burned, and which is December 7th, 1975.
December.
Is that right? 75? I was in the next to the last class, and I don't know who was in the last class, but when I got to have the opportunity, we had already moved over to Hudson, and we were meeting at the third floor of the bank, Hudson Savings Bank, when I got the offer to serve.
And what was that building like?
Well, it was 3 flights of stairs, but at the age that I was then, it was not an issue. But some of the older guys were going, that's too many stairs for me to do. They didn't want to do it. Their kitchen facilities were antiquated. They had a fairly good-sized banquet hall. The lodge room was an exact image of what our lodge room in UB is, and the furniture fits perfectly in the UB lodge room because the physical size was copied from Doric Lodge. And there was a time that Collation would always store-bought pie and coffee every single month. And Bob Jones come along, and he was, I think he was a steward at the time, if I'm not mistaken. He might have been junior warden, but I think he was a steward. And he was in charge of collations. So Bob was very enterprising and very daring. So he put together a wine and cheese collation. Oh, the hue and cry that went up. Oh, we can't have liquor in the lodge. We can't do this. We can't do that. And Bob Jones says, yeah, we can. We're going to do it. So they had the wine and cheese. It was a huge success. Everybody loved it. Um, and Bob and his wife Carol used to do some of the dinners. And I remember that he did kielbasa and sauerkraut. And the kielbasa was from a meat packer in Deerfield that Bob used to go deer hunting in that area. And he had this meat packer make this kielbasa sausage with venison. And I'll tell you, it was outstanding. So Bob was a very creative guy. And I have to give him credit. He was an influence in the lodge at the very beginning that a lot of people liked. So it was the beginning of a new era.
You talked about the furniture fitting in to our lodge perfectly. Can you tell us about how that got to our lodge and what participation Doric took and how many seats they got on the corporation
Yes.
for that?
Yeah. Walter Demorsion is a very ingenious guy. So he went over to the lodge room in Doric and he numbered every bench, chair, and desk. And he drew out a diagram and said, okay, bench number 1 goes here, bench number 2 goes there, and so on and so forth. So that when the furniture came over and went into the UB lodge room, it fit perfectly because that's the way it was in Doric. So the day of the move was scheduled for a Saturday. So I made arrangements with the company that I used to buy my motor oil from for my business. And they let me borrow a huge box truck. So we asked the master of Doric to get some guys together to help move the furniture. And the agreement was that Doric was going to donate their furniture for no rent the first year, and they were going to get 5 seats maximum on the board. But there was a condition that there was a certain amount of money that had to pay. I think they started with 3, and for every, I think it would be the $1,500 or $2,500 that they came up with, they would get 1 more seat up to a maximum of 5 on the corporation. They never did make the 5 level, but the day of the move, I got the truck parked out in front, and we've got a plan on how we're going to do it, and nobody from Doric showed up. However, I did have a couple of people that were friends of mine that are not Masons that offered to come out and help us with the move. And one was Larry Sorensen, who ultimately became a member of the United Brethren. So we moved all the furniture over there. And I remember that Bob Goodrow was kind of like the guy at the lodge who, as the stuff came in, he was telling everybody where the furniture would go and so on and so forth. He was like the coordinator. And there was one fellow from Doric, and I don't recall his name, who was at the building in Marlboro, that his contribution to the move was to bore the holes in the doors for the people next to the knockers. So we had all the guys from UB moved all the furniture over and set it up. And, and I couldn't understand, and I never will understand, why nobody from Doric pitched in. And it almost became a bit of a testy situation. And I think that part of the issue was that UB was, in comparison to Doric, we were very successful in getting candidates and activities and so on and so forth. And Doric was an old style lodge where the men went and they had their meetings and they sat around and talked and everybody went home. Well, UB was a very progressive lodge, very, very well respected in the district. So there was a bit of tension between the two for many years.
You talked to me about the physical building of the building, or how it was put together. And somewhere we have a picture of the people that were on the committee.
Yep.
Can you tell me about the committee and how that the design of the building went together in the building of the?
Yeah. I believe that Frank Stanunas was the chairman of that committee, and Alden Pomeroy was on that, Russ Browse, Walter Demorsion, Keith Piper. I think there were 5 altogether. I think I got them all. I had just finished the construction process of my first store, so I had a little bit of knowledge, just enough to be dangerous, about the building process. So they were going to solicit bids from contractors it was going to be a design build arrangement. So I found out that the guy who was the architect for my building was a member in Weymouth. His name was Norm Levin. And Norm said, you know, I can help you guys. Do you think they would let me propose a building for them? So I went to Stanunas and I said, I have another guy who would like to submit a plan and a cost estimate, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, oh, sure, not a problem. So he said, in 2 months, we're going to be interviewing the prospective architects / builders. And I said, okay. So I told Levin. Levin said, okay. So I met with Norm before the meeting that they were going to interview the architects. And Norm brought a working model. He built a working model of the lodge that he was proposing. And it was absolutely stunning. It had white pillars in front, a lot of, there's a lot of Greek architecture in there. And it was just, you take off the roof, you could see the first floor, you take off that, and you could see the downstairs of the banquet hall, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I can get you that building built with air conditioning for $265,000. I said, well, don't tell me, you got to tell the committee. So the night we met in Hudson, Norm showed up and he's got his working model of the building with him. And the committee would not allow him to take the model in as part of his presentation. So Norm went in and made the presentation and his cost estimate. And he didn't get the contract. So when I went to Frank Stanunas, I said, Frank, how come? He said, well, he was $15,000 higher than this guy, R.F. Wood. And I said, well, he tells me you folks wouldn't allow him to take the working model in. And he said, right, because none of the other guys brought working models. They didn't think it was fair. So then come to find out that Wood's $250,000 estimate did not include air conditioning. So to get air conditioning would cost them another $25,000. So Wood's proposal actually ended up at 275, which was $10,000 higher than Norm Levin's. So that was the process. But also, the interesting part was that Levin's included a complete kitchen workup. And when Wood delivered the building, there was nothing in the kitchen, nothing. So, we had to build out the kitchen.
Now, let me interrupt there. I understand from talking to Dick Carini that there was controversy about the island.
Oh my gosh.
And he actually told me, I believe it was you and him would go in at night, tear down what was done, and then in the dark of the night, build the island. Is that true?
That's true. Dick and I had a very special relationship. We would fight like cats and dogs over the construction of everything in the kitchen. And many times the air was blue with the expletives. And in fact, one of the times we were going at it hot and heavy, and a lady named Cynthia Hastings, who was part and parcel of Eastern Star, happened to walk into the building when we were in a heated discussion. And she stuck her head in the door and she said, boys, there's other people in this building. So Carini's going, oh, so I'm sorry, Cynthia. She goes, no. She said, these are not virgin ears. So, but, oh yeah, no, we were, it was a cat and a dog. But
and I just wondered, Cynthia was probably quite old at that time.
Oh wow, Cynthia was. I think that Cynthia was probably in her 80s at that time. But boy, I'll tell you, and she had some miles on her too. But I don't think she ever married. So she was a lady that experienced life in all the aspects, but she never shied away from anything. And she was very easy to talk to. She was a very nice lady, but she was a gem.
Dick, if I remember, you were the treasurer of the banquet hall committee, and Dick Carini was the manager.
Yes.
Can you tell me about some of those activities?
Well, we had it set up that we were able to buy bar supplies from a fellow in Acton, and he gave us a discount on everything. So we had offered our banquet hall out for wedding receptions. And Dick and Gloria, Dick's wife, would go down and set the banquet hall up for a wedding reception. And they'd put the skirting on the tables and they did the decorating and everything. And Dick would tend bar, and we would have wedding receptions there. And of course, Dick being local, his business was 6 blocks away from the lodge. He could be there in an instant. And he and his wife kind of like ran the banquet hall, and they did a very credible job. And my job was to keep the bar supplied, pick up the liquor, deliver it, and help with everything that was going on. But in the early days, we had no expertise in hall management or anything else, so we really didn't know what we were doing, but we made it work. It was not an easy process, and the amount of time involved, after the thing, it had to be cleaned up, and Dick and Gloria would clean the place. It was a labor of love. It was there, and some people questioned Dick's motives, which I found to be extremely surprising that anybody would even think that there might be something irregular. because that was not the case at all.
I understand that he lived in the east side of Marlboro. You lived in Northborough.
Yep.
After a weekend of events, which wouldn't be uncommon to make $2,000-3,000, if I remember in those days, that you would meet in a unique place to change the money for you to make the deposit. Can you tell me about any of those meetings?
Well, I don't remember a lot of that, but I know that in instances, you know, Dick would have the money in a brown paper bag, and we would stop and I think it was a roadside stop on Route 20 right at the Marlboro line.
Maple Lanes.
Yeah. Well, no. It was you know where the Mormon church is now. There was a little cutout there, and we would sit there and we would pass the paper bag. And so if anybody was ever recording that or looking at it from afar, they would say, what are these guys doing? They're either laundering money or they're passing drugs back and forth. But yeah, it was.
Did you once hand him a plastic bag of white powder?
No. No, I couldn't do that.
Hey, Dick, I think we covered the early years in your Masonic career. Why don't we take a break here, and we'll meet at another time, and you can talk about the middle years, maybe.
Okay.
Okay.